Welcome to the hard truth about book writing competitions. Tonight we have the four of us. We've got Matt Misetich, Ciara Duggan, Laura. Am I going to mess your name up, Laura? Laura Picklesmer, Picklesmer, and myself, Jeanne, Veillette Bowerman. I'm worker pipeline, but I'm going to have everybody give a little intro of themselves so you have an idea of who we are, what we do, so that might help you with gauging your questions. We already have four questions right out of the gate. We haven't even started yet. So Matt, we'll start with you because not because you're the man in the room, but because you're wearing a hat.
Am I though at this point? Our Fringe Press hat, which I'll explain towards at some point in this conversation. But am I introducing myself? I'll introduce myself.
Yes, please.
Oh, good. I have been here. This is my 19th year at Pipeline. Started when I was 12, so I'm still very young. No, I started the script pipeline, managed that for many, many years. And then as we expanded into book, into film, and now pipeline artists, kind of oversee all of that. Also on the book pipeline end with Ciara and Jeanne and the editor team that we have, taking more of a part in not only overseeing, but working with a lot of authors and helping them kind of transition back and forth in recent years between being a screenwriter and being an author and finding stuff for adaptation and things like that. In a nutshell, that is what I do. So,
Ciara, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello. So I actually entered Book Pipeline's unpublished contest in 2020 and was a finalist in the young adult category. And basically, it was just such a wonderful experience that I didn't leave you guys alone until I started working as an editor in the workshop, and kind of just moved up. And now I help run Book Pipeline with the contests and editorial services and helping connect our authors with our industry network professionals. And yeah, that's me. I love writing. I started in screenwriting. I got my MFA in screenwriting, and since moved into fiction writing. Previously had 2 books published through small indie presses, and yeah, just trucking along. That's me.
And Laura.
Hi, everyone. I'm a fiction writer. I write novels, short stories, and screenplays. I was also involved in the unpublished contest in 2020. I won the thriller mystery category. It's thriller mystery horror now, right? Which is pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah. For my debut novel, A Kill for Love, and Book Pipeline helped make this possible. It published at the end of 2023 with Unnamed Press. I also teach full-time. I teach English and creative writing at Chaffey College in Rancho Cucamonga.
Great. And I am Jeanne Veillette Bowerman. I am an executive at Pipeline and run Pipeline Artists and Symposium, which we are present at today. And if you have any ideas for future symposiums, just ping me. And I also am the co-host of 2 of our podcasts, Reckless Creatives with Sadie Dean at Script Magazine, and we talk about more screenwriting, filmmaking stuff there. And Ciara, Matt, and I also co-host a co-host a podcast, The Story Will Save You, and that is a relatively new one for us. And we just interviewed Megan Tusing, who is an audiobook narrator. That's in our latest episode. And I will send you guys a link to that podcast because it's more novel writing, publishing centric. And also Matt, Fringe Press. I'm one of the partners of that with Fringe Press.
Yeah, Pipeline co-launched a small press earlier this year in January with author Lee Matthew Goldberg and an editor friend of ours, Zoe Quinton. And we are open to queries. If you want to submit a query, Jeanne can drop the link in there for fringepublishers.com. And you can check out the criteria and see what we're looking for, and feel free to submit. We're voraciously reading weekly from there. So
yes, and the more out of the box, the better. Like push that envelope.
Weird stuff is what she's trying to say diplomatically.
stuff that just, gets us excited. And that
Yeah.
is a perfect segue into contest, because maybe we should, in this segue, talk about what kind of stuff. I know we were going to talk about this later, but what kind of stuff like pops for you when you guys are reading for the contest? Like maybe even what popped about Laura's submission, that made her the big winner. Do you remember? Doesn't
Yes,
have to
I
be
mean,
Laura specifically,
can-
but I wasn't there in 2020. But
I'll have Ciara kick it off unless she wants me to kick it off. But I think we're all gonna have the same answer, but just different, like in order of priority. But yeah, go ahead, Ciara.
I wasn't a judge for Laura's season. I was
I can comment on that.
But I mean, you can comment it. But even just from reading the back of Laura's book, it's such a clear concept. It's a concept that you can just envision it. It's easily communicated. You're getting into something that's exhilarating and intriguing, and that goes for if whether I'm reading your initial pages or your synopsis first, if I can sort of immediately imagine what I'm getting into and it's a clear concept with a really strong hook, then I'm gonna keep reading it because I want to know more. So just kind of hooking in that reader with a clear, cool, strong concept.
Yeah, I would actually.
what about you, Matt?
Well, we have the exact same answer in the same order, I guess. Like the concept is the thing that hooks me in first. I think it's probably because of I have more of a film and TV background to begin with. So it really is like, what's the pitch and how does it at least feel a pivot different for that genre or for that type of story? And it's been a while now. It's been 4 years, but I remember with Laura's, I read the pitch and I immediately thought, no offense, you did win. So let me hear me out. I read it and I'm like, well, I feel like I've seen that in like the spec script world. I feel like I've seen that in the stories like that floating around, like female serial killer. But then you start reading it and the concept is just enough to like bring you into it, but then you start reading how she executed the story and her voice and all the little rich details that she brings to it, and that's what really elevated it for me. So it wasn't this like mind-blowingly original like Minority Report, Philip K. Dick type of like insane concept, but all those little details that she put in there with what was already what I thought was a good conceptual base was what made it stand out and ultimately, a big reason why it got published, I'm sure. So
Yeah. And for me, it's obviously the concept, all of those things, but to add on to what they're saying, I don't speak for our contest. So I've judged for like screenwriting competitions in the past, but for book writing, I find that a lot of people start the book maybe too soon. So I'm very forgiving in those that like opening page, because I always feel like, okay, as long as I like the concept and the writing is really good, this kind of stuff, we could cut this, we could help them hone this, whatever. Same thing with a synopsis. Like I'm looking for, is there a story here? Is there a goal? Is there some sort of evolution? Is there some twist? Is there some, but if the synopsis isn't written perfectly, I'm not worried about that because Ciara's going to help you fix that.
Right.
And but when I look at the sample, once I've gotten to the point that I like this concept, I think there's a story here, and I look at the sample, really what I'm looking for is a great writing voice, like a command of prose, like something that just is like, and it's not like every sentence has to be this beautiful sentence. No, you just need one beautiful sentence every once in a while to make me go, I wish I wrote that, like, and so for me, that kind of stuff, because we can't elevate your writing, we can't elevate your voice. That's you. We can help you get the submission package ready in terms of making the pitch good and making your synopsis tight and making those 5,000 words tight and great. But we can't fix your voice. That's all you. So for me,
right.
The concept and the voice are like super, super important in terms of the difference between, oh yeah, this was a good book, between, or this is a winner,
And so it's just like screenwriting too. Sometimes all you need is just a little tiny breadcrumb of like what makes it different and personal to you. And I say personal a lot when it comes to like both the screenwriters and the novelists. If you're writing a story that where you're just kind of going through the motions and you're writing something because you feel like it's commercial, that rarely, if ever, works. You know, you have to bring some sort of personal, emotional connection to the material because that's going to end up showing on the page, and it's gonna read so much more. Like Jeannie said, your voice is going to come across so much better that way. And again, that's another thing that Laura, I think, did really marvelously in Kill for Love. So,
And these things that we're talking about in terms of what stands out for us in contests. Laura, I just want to ask you a question. As an author, like when you wrote Kill for Love, like, did you say, what was your goal in entering that into a contest? Had you entered it into other contests besides ours? Like, were there, and what were you hoping? Obviously, you're going to get published, but every contest has a different kind of prize package. So, like, what was your vision for this, and what made you say, I'm going to try to enter a contest?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to be completely honest, it was to get the book published, which book pipeline definitely delivered on. I did enter to a few other contests. And yeah, my recommendation is to just really look into the competition and what they're offering. Monetary prizes are great. Book Pipeline offers a monetary prize, which was super cool. Oh, I should have had too the award that I received. It's really cool. I can bring that out at the end. But more than that, I mean, it's really, I think most of us are here for the chance to be published. I didn't have representation when I pitched Kill for Love, so I was looking for an agent, and that was something that Book Pipeline helped me meet my current agent, who's wonderful, who still with me. So that's what I was looking for. I was looking for representation first and foremost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot, and that's something with contests that I think we were talking about this before. Well, you probably all heard it because apparently we were live.
Right.
When we were talking about like what you look for, because some people look for money, some people look for networking opportunities, like some and some people are just like, yeah, I really want an agent, like I don't care about the money kind of thing. I'll take it, but I don't care. So Matt, you were going to say something. Do you remember?
No, I was just going to say a lot of writing competitions. I mean, there's so many writing competitions, so it's impossible for me to be an expert on all of them. But in the book world anyway. But to me, it doesn't seem like most of them feels like you do the bigger ones anyway. You win, you get some sort of a cash prize. Usually, there's some sort of ceremony like a Penn Faulkner Award or something, right? But there's no like one-on-one, and I'm not segueing this into saying how wonderful Book Pipeline is. This is not a Book Pipeline ad, but I'm just saying a lot of them don't really do a lot of that hand-holding, but the ones that do, to me, I think are worth submitting to, whether it's a fellowship or a traditional contest, or any sort of platform that has an industry circulation component. I think that's a pretty big added bonus. I'm not saying it's required, as long as that platform is upfront about what they do. But I think that's kind of where things should be headed in the contest space. Especially, contest has been around for 110 years now. And I have proof of this, by the way, because I just bought an old Writer's Digest where they're advertising their writing competitions from 1920, 1921.
And I used to, full disclosure, I used to work at Writer's Digest.
Right.
But one of the prizes that they had was a pass to their conference. So that's like and if it's a really good conference, if it's like a whole dunk whatever conference is like in my county fair, I guess I'm gonna help you. But like I live in the country with one traffic light. So if we had a conference here.
But you would be there and you would be able to help them connect with lit agents. So
I would be there. But like a good reputation, a conference that has a good reputation, sometimes they have contests that get you a free pass to the conference. Right. So that's always cool. We've got some questions. There's actually one person in there that I think has 12 questions in there, but we're gonna try to catch. Yeah, we're gonna take them all. So first question was from Robert. How does one know if a writing competition is a scam?
That's a good question because there's
Who
a lot
wants to tackle that.
I mean, I'll hit that at first, and I'd love to hear Ciara and Laura's opinion because I haven't submitted to a competition since Nickel in like 2004, so it's been a while. But it's a good question because there's a lot of I wouldn't call them scams necessarily. There's just a lot of lame competitions out there and lame, just like obviously kind of money first, structurally schemes, let's call them. I was trying to find a diplomatic word for them. I don't think there's that many of them out there. I just think there's like sketchy contests, sketchy platforms, and then there's like that middle range of like, is it even worth submitting to this place, even though they might be delivering what they're promising. I just don't know if it's worth your time and energy and money. I would it's hard to say, like, because there's some newer platforms that don't have that like lineage where you can like look back and see that how established they are. But those aside, I mean, you have to look at kind of the history of that platform or that company. Definitely, if you can, get in touch with former winners or finalists if it's appropriate to do so. You can see like feedback and testimonials that they may have quoted people on. I would always, although we did this for symposium, but that was just to like, so we don't throw people's names out there. I was always make sure if someone did place in the contest and there's a quote on that site, make sure there's a name attached to it. Otherwise it's just this like obscure, ambiguous floating quote. But if it's a higher entry fee, or if there's an entry fee at all, they really should be offering some sort of a monetary prize, in my opinion, or some sort of like really great piece of circulation or whatever it might be. Ultimately, you kind of have to like, go with your gut. And if it's an established company that's been around a few years or 10 years or 20 years, chances are it's probably fine to submit there. So yeah, this could be a whole other Zoom, but that's pretty much the broad strokes. Ciara, what do you kind of
Also hop in.
I'm trying not to be the moderator. I'm sorry, Jeanne. Very hard.
I also think like if you're looking at a contest and they have like a contact page or like a email or something like that, you should always feel free to reach out and ask any questions you have. And I think a red flag is if you're not getting any response, or if their responses aren't very, I don't want to say personal, because sometimes it is just like, this is the facts that you're looking for. Yeah. But if it seems kind of flippant or they don't really care, then I don't know. I'm talking as the person who is usually responding to the info emails pipeline. So I try my best to make people feel good about entering the contest, knowing what we're looking for, understanding, what they need to submit, and just knowing that we're doing our due diligence. So if you're looking at a contest and you're not getting any response, you're not getting the answers you're asking for, then that might be a red flag. That's just my personal.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, what's interesting is, I always say to people, like, the thing what Matt was saying, like, look at the finalists, but don't just look at the ones who won the year before or 2 years before, because the publishing industry is slow. It takes a long time. So just because somebody won 2 years ago and they don't have a book out yet does not mean that it's not happening. I mean, Laura can speak to how long it took to get Kill for Love, on the shelves. But also I do know, like, I remember seeing one contest once, when you look in the fine print, this was a screenwriting contest, where it looked at the fine print and it said, this contest is not required to announce a winner, to like choose a winner, which says to me, like, you're just going to take all the money and you're not going to give any, nobody has to win. Like, that 100% scam. Like, like, get away from that right away. No one has time to read the fine print. People don't really do it. But if you can, if it's a contest you've never heard of, like, read the fine print, like, but also when you go on Facebook and you see a contest, maybe putting an ad out or whatever. And I think most people are like, you shouldn't have to pay for a contest. You shouldn't have to pay. Some people get confused between whether it's a writing competition or whether it's like some sort of
Vanity
vanity
press.
publishing.
Yeah, yeah.
And a competition is not vanity publishing. It's a competition. And
Right.
you know, whomever wins, the company should try really hard to get them some sort of traction. And if you want to know about scams in writing in general, there's a great website called Writer Beware. And Victoria Strauss does that site, and she will investigate all the scams. Somebody just dropped, oh, Matthew, oh, Matt did it. You're still on the host and panelist. Put it out to everybody.
Oh, no wonder people haven't been getting my cool links. Hold on.
Right. So you have to put that, you have to switch
Sorry,
your
it's
thing
my
to
first
everybody so
day.
everybody can see it. I know. Well, what does he know? This is why he's not the moderator.
Never have me moderate again. Yes.
But I'm actually going to have a one-on-one symposium with her, which is going to be another free event. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but I'll put it in the, I don't have a ticket made for it yet, but I'll get it. And she's fantastic. Like, you can email her and say, oh my gosh, I think this press is a scam. I think this is a scam. I think, you know, and she will do some serious, if she's got whatever she picks to investigate, she'll do some serious research on it and let people know. So she'll be doing a one-on-one with us, which you guys can ask a bunch of questions to her too.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, what made you, when you entered contest, feel confident that, okay, this is a contest that I feel like they're not going to just take my whatever X amount of dollars and run?
Honestly, I've made mistakes before, looking really closely at what's promised and making sure they deliver on that. I agree. Competitions cost money. That's to be expected. There should be a monetary prize, even if that's not the sole reason for entering, just so they have kind of skin in the game. And like I said, seeing exactly what's there. I agree that it's not as cut and dry that something's a scam or not, but sometimes there are competitions where the sole thing you get is just the name winner of this competition, right? And so if that's all they're promising you and there's no money or support or first look, then that's not going to be super helpful. The other thing with first looks too is sometimes they'll just offer it to one person. What if that person just doesn't jive with what you're writing, you know? So you want to avoid that too, where it's like you'll have one agent look at it. They might pass if that's all you're being offered, you know, for winning. That might not be enough. So just closely reading, and then looking at the track record, looking at past winners and their testimonials, as well as, you know, what they've done in the last few years.
Yeah. Do video teasers and trailers have value in a book competition?
Oh, this one's easy. No, it does. I'm sorry. I said it in my head. I'm like, no, of course not.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
You could say it out loud.
Yeah, in fact, here's a controversial take for you. I don't think video trailers are really necessary at all for authors, unless like Laura came out with a video trailer, but that her book was coming out, so she was like kind of building a vibe and a mood on social, on Instagram and stuff, and that I think helps. But if you're marketing your book to like lit agents and publishers, I don't know if that really does much of anything, right, Ciara?
I don't think so, because, you know, you could make a really, really cool video that sounds like, oh, like that looks awesome. But if the story doesn't jump off the page and the writing's not good, you know, the writing should paint that picture by itself without any added video or graphic or anything like that.
And I know there's companies out there, there's people out there that offer that service, and I don't know, it's kind of an unnecessary thing.
Kind of like you said already, if you're marketing your book, even if you're self-publishing, if you have the book coming out some way, like great, it might get people interested, it might bring them to purchase your book. But that's like if you actually have a book that you're selling or is being published already. Yeah. Trying to get an agent's attention, or if you're submitting to an indie publisher trying to get editor's attention, it's kind of unnecessary.
Let me ask Laura though, if the counter to that, once you knew Kill for Love was coming out, you had someone put together like a little sort of like a the name is escaping me, like a splashy sort of reel
trailer.
Trailer. Yeah, don't pay money to do it. And my husband's a filmmaker, so he provided a really cool
reel. He did that?
Yeah, he did that.
Oh,
So
I didn't know. Oh, good.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was helpful kind of as almost like a kind of proof of concept, but it's definitely not necessary if you don't have a publishing deal, if you're looking to enter a competition or get a publisher. The single thing that you should be focused on is just making your strong pages as strong as possible,
Yeah.
particularly that first chapter, those first 10 pages. And it costs money. I mean, that can be thousands of dollars to get,
Right.
done. That could be like $2,000. So I would say it's not, if you're wondering if it's necessary, it's definitely not necessary to pitch to agents or publishers or competitions.
I'm not going to add anything to that because I don't need to. And some of these questions, I'll pose the question, somebody can answer it, and we all four of us don't have to chime in, but we'll
Yeah.
do whatever. So Faith asked, what's the biggest writing competition you can submit to for recognition? I don't know the specifics of what the prizes are of all the different writing competitions that are out there. I have not done that research, so I don't think I can answer that question.
I think I mentioned Penn Faulkner. I actually don't know what the most respected, like, I know what they were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, but now it's kind of a mixed bag. But I think, the ones that have been around the longest are
For
obviously
unpublished. I mean, there's a lot of writing competitions for published novels that are those huge things, but for unpublished work, it's kind of a mixed bag because there's a lot of them. So you'd have to like Google and research all of them. I don't have a specific name, does not pop out to me outside of our own.
Outside of our home. Writer's Digest has,
yeah,
their
they've been
own
around
separate, some genre specific contests and things like that. Again, it goes back to the original question of like just doing your research and making sure like this is a fine place to submit to, and the entry fee is reasonable and their criteria is clear and their copywriting isn't sketchy. That's a whole nother. That's
and
also
I like
a whole
the
other
ones.
bad copywriting.
I also like the ones that have like they're different categories for different genre because it's hard for a horror to compete with a children's book.
Yeah.
You
I think they all have. I would imagine they all have different genre categories.
And if they don't, they should.
Yeah.
Is it okay to write a separate subplot on your synopsis if you do it within the allotted space? Ciara, give you that one.
Yeah, I think it depends on the story. I think the most important thing is that you're getting the main storyline and the protagonist's character arc communicated clearly. I think if the subplot is deeply integrated within the main storyline and kind of emphasizes the main character's journey, it's a really good thing to do because that just shows how well crafted your story is and kind of how, if you're communicating it well through your synopsis, just how well structured it is. If you're kind of at the limit, that would probably be something to go first. Again, like I already said, focus on the main storyline and the protagonist. But if there's room and you can do it in a way that doesn't detract or distract from the main storyline, then sure.
Yeah. I want to address this one question because we just talked about contests having different categories for genres. And so somebody had said pipeline contests seem to have a large list of genres. How can you pick a winner with so much variation? We don't pick one winner of everything. There's one winner for each category. So the horror is not competing against the children's, the horrors, like that kind of thing. So there's not just one pipeline winner like this, there's one for every category. I just want to make that clear. So we have a bunch of, we've got one person that has a ton of questions, so I'm going to intersperse that list with sprinkle other people's questions in too. Do I still need to submit an author bio if I submit through Coverfly? Like a separate author bio?
I think if you need an author bio to submit to competitions, and the answer is no, you don't really have to have that.
Yeah.
Unless the competition or the fellowship, some fellowships I know require that, but we don't. Most don't.
Oh, I want to also address this with Karen. Karen asked about where does memoir fit into what we were talking about before, about what appeals to us, because it sounded like the things we were saying were novel specific. We do have a memoir category, and really the memoir shouldn't be like cradle to grave. Like, well, obviously you're not dead yet, but shouldn't be like as soon as you're born on. Like, it should be the specific moment of your life that's really compelling. And for me, that's still, that voice thing still matters. What about you, Ciara, when you're thinking about, like, when the memoir one that we just had last season, we were all like immediately, oh yeah, this is the one.
Well, I think again, it's like, especially memoir, your voice should just be so strong. I know everyone has different preferences to, like, when you say voice, like how they prefer, what they like to read and stuff like that. But I think universally, if you're writing and your voice is confident and it's so clear that you know who you are, you know what story you're telling, especially memoir when it's your own story, typically about yourself, then I think that's really compelling. Because if you have a confident voice, other people will feel that and will be typically be interested in what you have to say.
And just a reminder to everybody, if you can put the questions to us in the Q&A box, which you'll see down at the bottom of the screen instead of in the chat. The chat is great to like chat amongst yourselves, drop links to stuff, whatever, but if you can keep them in the Q&A box, I won't lose them. What do you think about AI? For example, dropping the finished novel into ChatGPT for further editing.
I mean, I wouldn't trust it for anything. Honestly, the submissions that last year, I don't think there was that much of a problem, but there was a few I kind of popped in and just noticed it almost looked like the synopsis was written by AI. And I don't know how I can tell, but you can just tell. It's like when you look at when you're an expert on an artist and you look at a painting that's supposedly painted by them and you can just tell that it's fake. I think that's kind of where we're at with AI. I'm not super anti-AI on all fronts of writing. I mean, we've had Grammarly, we've had different sort of AI-esque software and things like that, in recent years, and that's okay. But when you use it to kind of hash out the creative process or your writing, or it's changed, God forbid, it's changing like the voice and like your style and all that, then I think that's an issue. So I would recommend not doing that, frankly.
I also feel like if you're dumping like an entire work into AI or ChatGPT or whatever, there's more room for error. If you have like small pieces you want double checked, or advice on how, like, research you have or advice on how to describe something, then maybe you could use it. But again, then you don't want, I feel like there's a fine line between, being confident in your own voice and then borrowing from something that is artificially created.
Right. Yeah.
So. And one of our attendees is a business English teacher and said, I can tell when it's AI written.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. We've already developed a sixth sense for it.
Yeah, and when I'm going through this list of questions, I'm trying to give priority to ones that actually have to do with contests, not just publishing in general, but if we have time, we'll go to the publishing ones as well. But just to emphasize, when you're asking about what to submit to a contest, every contest will have a different set of submission guidelines. So go, like, ours is under the criteria tag, the tab there. Some sites will have submission guidelines written. It's just like when you're querying an agent, like they all want something different. And so make sure you're just looking for each contest. And for ours, you do not need the complete, you have to have the novel completed before the deadline, but you don't have to have, you don't submit the whole novel to us. You submit just 5,000 words and a synopsis. So there's a lot of questions. There's a couple questions about, like, do we read the whole submission?
Yeah, I wanted to answer. James had a question there about with so many entries, how could we possibly read and consider every entry efficiently? I added efficiently just because I'm all about efficiency and not making mistakes and not missing anything. That's kind of a longer answer, but the broad version of it is we have different rounds. So it's just, if you think of it as like a big filter, So like first round, let's say Ciara's reading first rounders, she'll review that manuscript, review the synopsis, the pitch, and she'll say this is not very good and it's a pass, or she'll say, yeah, this has potential. That's all she really needs to kind of sign off on is like, does this have potential to place or to win? And then she puts it to the second round, and then another different reader, let's say it's myself or Jeannie or one of our editors is reading the second rounders. That person will read it and kind of weigh in. So it's going through different sets of eyes. We have our own sort of like general internal criteria, but honestly, the criteria is if the writing is good and the story feels interesting and at least slightly ambitious and elevated in some way, then it moves forward, and we just kind of like whittle things down from there. That's in no way a proprietary sort of like system. I would hope most contests do it the same way, because I think that's the most effective way to really find like the stuff that you're going to be excited about in the end. But yeah, we start kind of that process early on, and it never really feels overwhelming. Knock on all the wood in the world. So this season runs as smooth as every other season has. But
And I'll also add to that we are all writers, so we
Yeah.
respect that you have taken the time to write these words, so we read them,
yes,
and then when we get down to those handful of like semifinals, finalists, we're all looking at them, the semifinals, we're all looking at the finals, everybody. And then we have a conversation at the end of like, okay, which one do you think that you would advocate for to win this category? And most of the time we're in complete consensus that
sometimes we're not. That's the fun
sometimes
part, where
we're
we have
not,
to
right?
argue a case for, yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to add quickly too, a little more of the nitty gritty is that when you look at our deadline structure, we have multiple deadlines, and the earlier you submit, the cheaper it is. And that's kind of our way to incentivize writers to submit earlier, because our contest runs nearly a full year, so that we can stay on top of the amount of submissions we receive.
I should note too, before we get the inevitable question, it doesn't matter what time what zone you submit in or what deadline you submit in. It's all, the criteria is the criteria. That doesn't really change. So, and I would recommend that for all competitions, by the way. Just submit as early as possible, especially if you're. This is the one thing I think we do that's unique that I haven't seen anyone else do, and we do this for script too. You can register early and then submit the final draft later at no extra fee. So that I like, because then there's no pressure to like polish your stuff perfectly and then submit in September for something that ends in July or whatever. So anyway, slightly off topic, but just worth mentioning.
And no, we do not toss things out if they're not like, perfectly formatted.
Oh yeah, that was the other question.
There was another question too.
Right, yeah.
It's about the mature, because that's all stuff, again, that's all stuff that can be fixed. It's, we're looking for writers who have a good voice and a really cool story. So, okay.
While you're looking for another
contest.
While you're looking for another, someone asked, everyone should watch American Fiction if you haven't seen it. Won the Academy Award last year for screenwriting, or for best screenplay. In answer to the question that I just kind of saw in the chat, are those readers an accurate representation? I've seen lit agents and publishers, and on the film side of things, managers and producers pass on material for like the weirdest of reasons. So again, this is kind of tangential, but just know that like you're going to get so many different types of rejections, and to not let that bring you down. Laura can probably speak to that a little bit. Laura, what was the weirdest? No, I'm kidding. We want to divulge what the weirdest rejection you got was, but Kill for Love, wasn't everyone's thing for a while until it found that, that sort of perfect publisher home.
Yeah. suggestions, like, maybe turn it into YA and just take away the murder, which is kind of the key part of the book. So yeah, there'll always be strange things. I mean, I've heard rejections based on character names, just person didn't like a name. So totally feel you there. But yeah, I agree with submitting early too, because typically the cost goes up too. So the earlier you can get something in, like if you're sure you want to submit as soon as possible, because it might be double the price at the very end
Right.
for that late submission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Word count. They said they noticed that thriller novel submissions word count recommendation is 70 to 90,000 words. What if the novel is over that word count? So like and so like say we pick a winner, I don't even know, do we have them saying when they submit their entry, or what is your estimated word count of your novel before we even get it? Because if we accept a novel and be like, oh my God, this is amazing, this is fantastic, because again, this is all stuff that can be edited and fixed later, but it's 200,000 words. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like we have our first call with a winner. It's like, oh my God, it's 200,000.
In our case, that's okay. Just because if it's something that's that good and we picked it to win, like we'll find a way around it. Honestly, if it's that good, then the writer's probably good, and the writer probably knows not to write a 250,000 word literary novel, right? So, but yeah, that's I know the question was like pertaining to genre too, right? Like what the average word count should be based on the genre, and that's gonna fluctuate as well.
Laura, this is a question directed at you. Did your publishing deal come from the agent or the other way around?
Came from my agent. So I won at Book Pipeline back in 2020. Took a bit of time. It was like 9 months of pitching. I met with a bunch of agents, all connected through Book Pipeline team, and met my current agent. And then she went on submission with the manuscript, which by the way was 70,000 words. So you definitely do need that word count when you're ready to take it. And certain publishers won't maybe take certain word counts. Like I imagine a 250,000 word manuscript would be a tough sell.
Right.
But yeah, so my agent took it to publishers and arranged the deal.
And how long did it take from when you got the deal to when the book was on the shelf?
For the literary scene, pretty quick, and then you're probably going to laugh when I tell you, a year and a half, only a year and a half. Unnamed Press is a LA publisher. So yeah, if you sign with the big five, it's usually like 3 years. I have a friend, it was like almost 4 years between signing and having the book released. But for me, it was a pretty quick turnaround. It was about a year and a half.
Right.
That is good. What is an under the radar writing or screenwriting competition that needs to be recognized and entered by an up and coming writer? Again, it's hard for us to name specific contests because we're busy working.
Well, that, and I don't personally have the I think because people ask me this for screenwriting too, and there's very few screenwriting contests I haven't heard of. But I also obviously don't have like that one-on-one experience with them because obviously I didn't submitted to them, right? And haven't had that firsthand ground floor interaction. So it's hard to say which ones are kind of worth it more than others. Again, I think word of mouth, the reputation of the competition, if it has a lot of success stories, if it's looked upon highly, if it's transparent in everything, if there's a certain degree of transparency there, I think that's really important too. So
one thing you might look into, because I see some questions regarding like I'm not done with the book or what if I haven't finished, is looking at first chapter or first book contests that are often held by journals. So a lot of literary journals, like off the top of my head, I feel like Craft and Electric Lit, but I mean, there's probably dozens of literary based journals that do first chapter contests, and they do usually specify that you don't actually have to have the book manuscript ready to submit the first chapter. And so you can submit to those, and there's usually very similar things where it'll be published. There's monetary compensation, and usually there's also agency looks as well.
Mhm.
Somebody asked, okay, and I hear this question a lot coming from people. How do writers know when they've submitted? How do they know where they are in the where they got dropped? Like a lot of them want to know, like, how come we can't be told where, at what phase did we not make it past the second round or past the third round or past the, semifinals? And maybe
Yeah,
you could explain why that would be difficult to do.
it's difficult to do on the contest because if you're dealing with, several hundred or several thousand entries in our case, it's difficult to kind of notify the writer where they dropped out. It also, to me, honestly, this is debatable, but I don't think it really matters if you got dropped in the second round or the third round. Like, what's that? Is there really that palpable difference? Like, it's going to boil down to a little bit on the subjectivity of the competition, right? Because every competition is going to have their own their own subjectivity to it, right? To be simple, to put it simply. So it's hard to say. I do think that it would be nice if like you came close to the finals in a contest if you were notified of that. And we are pretty good about at least telling some of the writers that we were considering because ours for each category is only the winner and the runner up. So there's only 2 for each category. But if someone came close, I think we did this last season, Ciara, right? We reached out to a few writers and said, hey, this is really good, but we thought this, and this, maybe you could work on that if you want to send it back to us. And that all that stuff kind of happens behind the scenes. But to go deeper than that and reach out to too many writers, it gets a little unwieldy on the management end. But I do understand the question and why that would be ideal,
Yeah. And also speaking about early submitting, somebody was concerned that if they submitted early, wouldn't the manuscript get read early? And then how does that help with those people who are submitting
Right.
later? And, aren't you going to forget it by the time you're reading the later ones?
That's
And
a good
that's
question
why
too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so for us, we do accept, submissions, a final draft later. If you do submit later and it was something that was already judged in the first round, we'll just reread the new version. So it adds a little extra administrative chore for us, but not really that much. So that's kind of our process there. So we'll always read the latest, make sure we read the latest draft of that submission.
Yeah, and just also to clarify, like just because we've read it early in the process doesn't mean like if it moved on to if it was, each one is just judged, especially in the early phases, just judged, is it compelling enough to push it to the next round? It's not really comparing it against anybody else at that point. It's just moving it to the next round because we want another set of eyes on it. And then a different one on the team will go look at it. And then it'll go to the next round. And so not all of us are reading all at the same time. So something that was submitted early might be something I'm reading in October. Like, so because it was read by somebody else earlier. So don't worry that it's going to somehow get lost.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't speak to other competitions, but for us, like my absolute number one priority is like not missing a good piece of material, which by the way, side note, but a very, very important one. And this goes back again to the first question. It was a good first question because it was like a bedrock question, right? We can keep revisiting. But the competition that you're submitting to or the platform that you're submitting to should not be using volunteer readers because that's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. Film festivals still use so many volunteers too, which is also ridiculous. Completely separate industry. But and it should be using people who this is gonna sound weird, but like have skin in the game, who have a connection to that company. So because they're gonna want to find good stuff. Like Ciara can't wait to find the next great book, the next Kill for Love or something, right? Or the next Laura. Or the next Her, since she won in 20 or since she placed in 2020.
Can't wait to find the next me. How vain.
Yeah. Should be your bio and all your socials. But the team that's judging it is kind of everything, right? Like the recognition of the reputation of the company and the name recognition and all that. None of that really, the flashiness of the website, none of that matters. What matters is the team that's reading the material. And I forget why I skied off on this tangent, but I'm glad I did because that was important to mention too. So yeah,
And
the biggest
also,
thing is not missing anything good, so that we have a very fine-tooth comb process, almost overkill, but you know.
yeah. But again,
Sorry,
that's
Jeanne.
also why it costs a fee. So like if you're paying a fee to
Sure.
enter a contest and they're using volunteers to read,
That's the
you
other,
know,
yeah.
it you want quality people reading your stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that
We could
contest shall
rant
remain
about all that
nameless.
for a whole hour more, but yeah.
Okay, so what about when a contest offers a critique? Is that worth doing, or especially because you've got a lot of entries, like how does it, what kind of quality critique are going to get? Is it worth that extra moolah?
I'm curious, Laura, have you submitted to places where it does include feedback? And I guess Ciara, the same question.
It's usually, if it's offered, it's additional. I think what Jeannie was hinting at, usually
Right.
it's substantially more because you are paying for that added time. I mean, that's going to take the reviewer probably, if it's a whole manuscript, hours to read through and note. I've heard the feedback can be really good. Personally, I've never done it. So anytime I've submitted to a competition, I've never clicked and paid that extra fee for feedback. I do workshops, I got an MFA, and so that's kind of where I got that feedback, wrapped into the tuition I was already paying to earn that
Right.
degree. I think it could be helpful to try out, like if you're hitting a wall and you're just really stuck and you're maybe feeling like, this isn't placing, and I think something's missing or I'm not sure what it is, it might be worth it to invest, but I do want to caution that it is usually a significant amount of money. Like it's whatever the competition fee is times like 5 or 6.
I'd also like to add, I don't have much experience with entering contests and getting critique with it either, but I have seen, I can't think of the names off the top of my head, but they outline what kind of feedback you're getting. So it's like, if you opt to get feedback, you'll get a 1-page overview of things you need to work on, or you'll get inline comments with in-margin feedback and stuff like that. Whereas if it doesn't detail what you're going to get, I feel like you could easily just get like a 3-sentence feedback being like, the voice isn't strong enough, and you've paid an extra $50, $100 for a teeny blurb, So I think that's definitely something to pay attention to.
You paid how much for a teeny blurb?
No, I didn't. I'm saying
No, but I'm saying in general, you said 1,500?
No.
You could pay like an extra $50 on top.
Oh. I was typing an answer to somebody, so I should just stay out of the conversation.
Stop half listening. And I think like it depends on the context and the kind of feedback. I'd rather I like to get like separate feedback, like go to like Script Pipeline or Book Pipeline or wherever you want to go and be like, yes, I would like some feedback on this. I'm going to go to the workshop, get some feedback. That to me, I feel is more because that's just what they're focusing on. It's not about compete the competition,
Right.
But whatever, every contest is different. Somebody said, can you talk about category section, for example, historical fiction? Yay, historical fiction. That's what I'm saying. For ours, I remember I was advocating for a historical fiction section category, but I think I got outvoted. Where did that end up? I haven't looked at
general fiction.
General fiction. See, we're just history lovers, just stuck in general fiction. Okay, maybe Paul, you can advocate with me, and we can try to get a separate historical fiction category because it's a whole different skill set. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here.
No, it's fine.
Are you, is the exposition of the history, is it done in like, oh my God, I'm so bored. It's like I'm in a history class over here. Like make this about the story. And because it can be done well and it can be done.
We already had 10
many,
categories, which I feel like a lot of categories already.
And I'm not sure how many historical fiction entries we actually get. I'm going to pay attention this year.
I think it's.
I would love. Yeah.
it's in the majority. That's why we ended up deciding just to put it in with general fiction.
See, now you're
Yeah.
getting to hear what happens when we don't agree.
Well, we've had historical fiction winners in the past, like YA historical, I guess. But
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah. They're not
the-
anti-history.
No,
I'm
we're
just
not
kidding.
anti. We're not anti anything. You should have seen some of the most insane stuff that we've picked to place and win. And Laura's book also kind of a crazy, crazy grounded story. Oddly,
It's also always evolving too. Like last year, we had romance/women's fiction genre, but we got a lot of feedback that but they can be so different. So then we moved women
yeah,
under general fiction. So as a contest too, we're learning and we're adapting as well. So
yeah, just to see
if
what.
you have any suggestions or feedback or anything like that, we love to hear it, and we do take it under consideration.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we have a few questions about like, do I need to submit the word count for this? Do I need to submit, different questions about what I need to submit? Again, just want to go back to just look at every contest is different, what you have to put into it. At what stage, this is not a contest question, but I'm just going to ask the question because maybe Laura can speak to this. At what stage should you consult a developmental editor, if at all? Did you use one at all, Laura?
No, that's where my grad fees for doing an MFA and an English major came in. So I felt pretty confident on kind of, both the plotting and the prose itself. After finishing the MFA, I was working on the novel through my MFA program. What was the question about when to use a developmental editor?
Yeah, like at what stage of the writing would you consider using a developmental editor?
I mean,
and there's all different kinds of editors, so people know. There's like, go ahead, Laura.
Oh yeah, I would probably have a first draft done just so that you have, maximize the number of pages and the ability for them to kind of see the whole story. And if you're looking at costs, I mean, I know, that's a lot of time and effort, so that could potentially be thousands of dollars. So if you don't have that, maybe consider writers groups, workshops. If you look in your area, there's lots of online and local workshops and writing groups that maybe you can get some feedback if you're just looking for early feedback on whatever you're working
on. As someone who just hired a developmental editor, our editor for Fringe, actually, I'm having her read my own book. I think it's useful. It is costly, and I'm going to discount, but it's still, there is a monetary investment. I personally wanted it because I haven't written. I took a long hiatus in fiction. I know a lot of writers out there have I haven't written in 5 years or 10 years. And so it kind of helps to refocus yourself by having someone really dig deep into your manuscript and give you the type of notes that you can carry over into your next book where you might not need a developmental editor at all. So that's just my
and I always look at those things as like a developmental editor. I look at as like a tutor, just like,
for sure, consultant. Yeah.
Look over my stuff. I'm going to learn from the skills that I can use in my next book. And
or even having, I'm not plugging the workshop either, but we don't offer developmental editing, but even having someone review like the query in your first 5,000 words or something, at a very, that's a much lower price point. And I think that it's very much worth it. Especially the query letter, getting your query reviewed, because it's so important.
I'll jump
I
in
always
there
felt too. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ciara.
Just the fiction evaluation, we evaluate the first 5,000 words and the synopsis. So if you aren't able to afford what like a full manuscript review might cost, paying a smaller fee, we'll look at your initial pages and the synopsis. We're then able to kind of comment on the story structure and any glaring story issues we might notice there as well. So that's kind of like, I don't want to say a shortcut, but a good place to start at least.
And some places will review your outline. and that, like, so if you want to just right out of the gate, maybe you're confident about your word, your prose and all of that. That's not something a developmental editor is going to get into. The prose, they're getting into the story structure. Does the story make sense? Is it have enough conflict? Is it moving fast enough? Are there twists? Or there whatever? So those are, to me, I would probably use a developmental editor before, a copy editor or something.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So somebody asked a technical question. The last day that you can email in pages for book pipelines unpublished, because we have deadlines listed based on the prices. So the day, like the later ones are more expensive, the earlier ones are less expensive. So right now up on the site it says September 5th, but also says September 20th. They're separated out because they're two different price points. But what is it, midnight Pacific time?
If the final version of the materials just need to be sent by the 20th at
Okay.
midnight Pacific, yeah. Basically. So
So if you live on the East Coast, you can stay up late.
Right.
I'm also going to be
until 3
sending
a.m.
an email, to if anyone's submitted already and you haven't sent in your material yet, in the next few days or early next week, I'll be sending just a reminder email, get your work in by the final deadline.
Yeah.
So you'll be good.
Yeah. I know we're a little over on time, but there's a few other quick contest questions that I can probably tackle really quick, Jeannie.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Yep. Go right ahead.
Shoot, now I've lost. Okay, we go. Someone had a question about a book the writer also illustrates, and I think if you can include illustrations,
Oh,
that
yeah, I
question
saw
was
that.
up there. Well, for that, yes, if you're submitting to their children's book category, we'll accept, supplemental materials. I think that's fine. Ultimately, we're judging on the story and the concept and the writing, but supplemental materials would be fine. There was another question. I'm just going to address it really quick. After hundreds of competition refusals, would you recommend a writer quit writing and spend their time on something more fruitful? Yes, if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to do that and you want to be a writer, then you have to keep writing. Not to be like an after school special, but you have to kind of stick with it. And there was one other one that I thought was important for competitions. The other one, this is book pipeline, or this is specific to book pipeline, but no, you don't have to have a completed correction. You're not submitting the completed manuscript to the competition. You're submitting the first 5,000 words. But yes, your book should be finished if you're entering. If that makes sense.
Okay, this is, I think, an important question. For somebody who's a new writer and they're a beginner and they're entering contests, what are some of the things that brand you as a beginner and might turn off the reader? So, like, are there anything that jumps out at you guys when you're looking at material that says, wow, this person, this might be their first book. Like, maybe they need a little more time to. Is there anything that you can think of that really jumps out at you? I think for screenwriting, it's so much easier because the formatting is wonky and there's huge amount of blocks of prose when everything should be a lot of white on the page. I think it's super obvious in screenwriting. Not as obvious in novel writing, I don't think.
I'll go last, but I'd actually like to hear from Laura on this one too. I know she's a writer and not necessarily a reader, but she's also a professor. So, but go ahead, Ciara. You can take it.
I would say the first thing that comes to mind for me is when you're reading a first chapter and it's like pure exposition, and it's a lot of just telling the reader information and not getting into the story. And there's a place for that, but I feel like if you're on page 10 and you're still just getting background and it's all telling, no showing, then I feel like, okay, this is probably someone newer.
Or it's like they woke up with the alarm clock and starting their day and telling every single thing that's happening.
Too many trivial details is definitely a sign of a beginner. I hate to say it, but like also, and this could work. I would never tell a writer like don't do X or don't do Y, because you can always make it work and put your own unique spin on it. But like a lot of books open just talking about the weather, and what that tells me is that you don't really know how to open the book, so you defaulted to like what we were doing before we started talking about the weather, right? It feels chit chatty. There's no dynamic opening to it, which is personally what I look out for when I start reading a book, is like what kind of tone, what kind of atmosphere are you setting? Because that's going to be the mark, I think, usually of a mature author. So, Laura?
Yeah, I would say what was mentioned, what Jeannie mentioned earlier, voice, a strong voice immediately jumping off the page. But the question was what to look out for. So I can put my professor hat on, and I would say in addition to like heavy exposition, what you were describing, just like perspective shifts, is there a clear perspective? Verb tense shifts, are we shifting out of past and present unintentionally? Definitely typos, obviously, if it's hard to read, if I'm just confused and I don't really feel oriented because of, let's say, like I said, shifting tone, perspective, verbs, and then obviously that stilted language that comes from AI, it'll be grammatically flawless, but who cares because it's all stilted and, just lacking that kind of authenticity. So those are the first things. And there are some formatting rules that you really want to pay attention to. It's not quite like screenplays, but if they ask for Times New Roman, 12 point, double spaced, don't turn it in single space. That will just immediately alert readers that it might be a new writer.
Have you
And
caught
also too, like
AI from your students?
Oh, that's a whole other
Okay,
symposium.
let's forget. I'm just curious. Sorry, Jeannie.
but also too, like passive verbs and like, is running instead of dashes across the, like those little choices that you make the read like so much more engaging. I will say one thing about details, like too many details. I'm listening right now an audiobook to Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth. And there was this one scene, I was just amazed how much detail he went into every little thing that this guy did. And I remember thinking, God, I would have steered away from that. I probably would have moved that further, but I'm imagining the whole thing in my head, and the angst of this guy leading up to this moment. And every little detail actually did build the tension because you're feeling it with him as he's approaching this priest, you know? So sometimes little details can be very helpful in storytelling, and other times it's just like, oh yeah, shut up already.
And everybody here knows that like it's such a fine line to find not just your voice, but where's the Goldilocks zone when it comes to like providing detail, and you really have to put care into each sentence. Not every book that's published puts care into each sentence, trust me. You can go to any bookstore and pick up any book at random and you'll see like this is just kind of mid. But in the early stages you should strive to like get to that point where it's a nice middle ground between flowery language and like something that's easy and simple to understand and comprehend. I was reading, this isn't one of our authors, but I'm going to give her a little shout out anyway. I.S. Berry's book, The Peacock and the Sparrow, I started reading because I assume I'm going to see her next week at the VoucherCon conference. I wanted to be educated on her book. And I'm reading it, and she goes into so much depth on little details set in the Middle East, set in Bahrain, and she's going to all these little details and cigar smoke and this and that. And it's like it just works so beautifully because it's building an atmosphere, but you're not going into so much detail where it becomes boring. So all those little nuances in writing, and that takes a long time to develop. I don't think anyone's really born with that, right?
Right.
Everyone's written a bad book before, everyone's written a bad short story before, so this is a good place to end. Like don't get down on yourself. If your writing's not quite there yet, you just have to keep kind of refining it and reading more and writing more, and then it'll just come eventually, I think.
Well, I'm not going to let you end yet because there's a couple questions. Look, Linda asked the same question twice, so I know
You're
she
one of my
wants to
ending
answer this
segue.
question.
Okay, it's okay.
Sorry. Short story competitions. She's asking if there's a lot of them out there that she's had quite a few short stories published in lit journals, but hasn't entered contests. I would imagine there are quite a few out there. But if your short stories are being published in lit journals, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
We accept short stories too on Pipeline Artists. I'll drop the link there too.
Oh yeah, and I'll also say, and before I
it's
get
not-
to the final question, I'll also say with our winners, like there's an interview of Laura up on Pipeline Artists. Like we really try to we'll have them on the Story Will Save You podcast now that we have that podcast. We really try to get as much exposure for them that's like super low hanging fruit for us because we have all of these things. Like Laura is on the symposium right now. Ciara's on the symposium right now. We will, like Laura, we can link to her book when we send you guys out the recording if you guys are interested in reading it. Like we try to find organic ways to help promote. And we also publish short stories and poems on Pipeline Artists. And some of our people who've done well in our contest have pitched us, hey, I've got a short story. Will you take a look at it? So those are all ways. You never know how it might not be the contest that gets you discovered. It might be because you wrote that short story for a lit journal. It might be there's, even just an article. I wrote an article for Writer's Digest like back in 2011, and I had an agent approach me. So, I mean, you never know what's going to get you noticed. Somebody asked, and I'll leave this as our last question, it has nothing to do with contest, but what movie or book inspired you, all of us, to become writers?
This is the question for us?
Yeah. Movie or book.
Okay.
So like the thing that said, I wish I wrote this. Or, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to do this. Like, was there something like that inspired you? Like a piece of art that inspired you? Or was it just that inner, I have to write?
Mine's a cliche answer, so I'm going to skip it. You guys go.
Okay.
Mine's really dorky. So I did musical theater in high school, and I was in a production of Les Mis. And the actor playing Jean Valjean was singing "Bring Him Home," and I just remember watching it and being like this. It just was this moment of like this play, this story, the music is so compelling. No matter what I do, I need to do something that gives me this feeling of story and just story filling you with that kind of emotion. So I think that's one moment I always think of.
Theater kid.
Do you have a moment, Laura?
I do actually have a moment. The first time I ever attempted to write a novel, I don't know the exact age I was, but it was so far back that it was R.L. Stein. It was Goosebumps. I was like, I'm gonna write my own Goosebumps about a vampire in the attic. And I remember like I got through 20 pages and then just hit a wall, and I'm flipping through like, wait, but I have to get up to 150 and I'm stuck at 20. Like I already reached the climax at 20. And so that was like my first realization at how hard it was to write a book. But that was my first attempt. When I'm on a project, I have a bunch of inspiration points. So like rather than just have one book, it's always like, what am I currently writing, if that makes sense? So yeah. Matt, what's your...
That's great. Actually, I don't feel so bad because mine's sort of similar because it was also a horror novelist. But I'm not looking for a career like Jeanne. Like we're not looking for a career in novel writing necessarily, but we both are
we're too busy at Pipeline.
Yeah, and like, look, I mean, honestly, that's not really my path. But I did write a book, and I would love to publish a book every 3 months. Can I do that? But I'll make this quick. The year was 1997. No, I just I'll make it quick. But it was 1997, and I was reading. It was the summer before like my junior year of high school, and I read like every Stephen King book. And I got to I got to The Dark Tower, and I got to part 4, which was Wizard and Glass, and then part 5 hadn't come out yet. And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna write my own book. And it was the worst book. I still have it. I would love to publish it unedited, just as like the perfect example of what not to do. And it's like, it's terrible. The concept's terrible.
Yeah, but how old were you?
It's so 16.
Yeah, I mean
15 or 16. It's so good. It's so good. It's the best bad book I think you'll ever read. And that kind of kicked me off. Then I wrote another book in my senior year of high school that actually wasn't a terrible idea. And then just kind of went from there and then quit and then came back. But it was Stephen King.
And
So
and Robert said, I've got an answer to this question, but I just want to throw this out there because Robert said I thought writing a book would be easier than writing a screenplay, and he's laughing. I always wanted to write a book, and I had a friend say to me, "Oh, write a screenplay; it's so much easier." Neither of them are easy. They're just different. They're hard
no,
in different ways. And
yeah.
but for me, with inspiration, I did those like high school angst poems, stuff like that. But I always liked to write, but I just thought, oh God, if I wrote, like, it would be like writing a term paper all the time. But then I remember reading, I didn't start writing till later in life, like I was in my 40s. And I I remember reading a book by Ellen Burstyn called Lessons in Becoming Myself. And it's autobiography, but it wasn't like, oh, I was in this movie and then this star, hit on me. Like, it wasn't like that. It was this incredibly moving, personal, raw, real, emotional, and she really ripped open her wounds and handed the reader the salt shaker. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to make people feel. I want to make people, just understand. I'm not going to write an autobiography because no one cares about my life, but I want it, but of a character. I
I'd
want
read
people to
it.
feel that way about it. Okay, I do run a
Not to go into too
cemetery.
much detail, but I'd be the
Yeah,
first person.
I do run a cemetery. I do have an interesting life, but not doing it. But the just that thing, like I'm sure all of you feel like you just want to make people feel like the best compliment you can get is when somebody reads your work and says, I wish I wrote that. Like
Right.
that feeling, it's like a drug. And then once you get that, you can't stop. Like you have to keep doing it, even if it has taken me 20,000 years to write this book.
Right.
I'll
But you're
get
writing
there.
historical fiction. There's so much
I
research.
know. Because
I like
I
to
always
bring
want to
this
do it
up.
complicated.
We can wrap soon. I like to
Yeah, we
bring
can
this
wrap.
up just because it makes Jeannie angry. But like I did NaNoWriMo in 2022 and I finished it 60,000 words in a month. It's not that hard. You
No,
3,000
I've done
words, a
no,
day,
I've done
2,500
nano
words a day.
successfully, but I wrote
Yeah.
50,000 words of crap like a few years back. And then I did nano the next year and I decided I'm not gonna just ignore the word count and just try to write every day. And
Yeah.
I ended up with 20,000 really good words. And that did end up being a book that I never did anything with, but it was like my practice book, what I call
Right.
it.
I mean, mine was brilliant, but like I get it. I get what you're saying.
Of
100%.
course it was.
Out of here.
All
All
right.
right.
So, well, thank you guys. And I want to just tell you the next symposium is on September 11th, and it's with Meredith Allen. It's a logline workshop. And I know a lot of authors don't think they need log lines. It's really like a screenwriting, you know, thing that they call it a log line. In the publishing world, elevator pitch, like, one or two sentences that really succinctly, break down what your story is. This session is amazing. Meredith will, workshop things like on the fly right there in the session. So check that out. I will put a link to it.
I got
And
it.
are you dropping a link?
Hey, the
You're
host
the
in me
link man.
has to
And in
completely take
terms of
control of this
like,
zone.
and in terms of publishing stuff that we have coming up on October 16th, Julie Green's teaching a session, writing captivating scenes. And
Wow.
and for those who have I have Lee Jessup's name down there. It's not Lee. We've got somebody teaching a book author speaking engagements, like how to book those speaking engagements at conferences and stuff to help promote your book. And like I said, Victoria Strauss. And if there are any screenwriters out there, we have Bob Sines teaching a Christmas for Cable one. But some of you might be writing Christmas, like, books that could be Hallmark movies
It's a
someday,
huge
like
market
rom-coms,
for sure.
right? So Bob's advice would probably be very helpful for you too, because you might as well write a book that's structured like a screenplay. Just saying.
even I'm excited for that lineup, and I should know exactly what's coming up next. And this was all news to me, so it's awesome.
Yeah, I've been a busy
Can't
girl,
wait.
and there's a
Yeah.
couple in there I didn't even mention.
Right.
All right.
I've been.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I will get the recording email out to you guys in the morning.
Yes, and a big thanks again, Laura, for joining us, listening to us ramble for
Thanks
a
for
bit.
having me.
Also, Kill for Love now on shelves. Go pick yours up today. I don't know how to promote it.
Okay, hold that up
I
again.
love the cover too.
Just
Yeah,
look
hold the
at that
cover up.
cover. Hold
One
it
of
up
my
for a second.
favorite
Isn't that
covers
awesome?
all time.
It's
It's
so
so
good.
pulpy and noir, and yeah,
Love
big
it.
fan.